Hello, my friends, and today I want to walk you through the events shaping our geopolitical landscape. We begin with ongoing developments in Gaza, where there are discussions about a second phase of a peace initiative. Heavy weapons would be handed over first, followed by lighter arms, and there is talk of a required acceptance that would allow Israel's defense forces to withdraw beyond the so-called Yellow Line. The second phase envisions Gaza being managed by a peace council led by the United States, alongside regional and Western leaders, including former British Prime Minister Tony Blair working with envoys Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff. This announcement could come before Christmas, and it is framed as part of a broader effort to res. Meanwhile, in Washington, Mexico's president is heading for her first face-to-face meeting with Promation. In the economic arena, the director of the EU National Economic Council, Kevin Hassett, has expressed confidence that the Federal Reserve could cut interest rates by 25 basis points at its December meeting. He insists that the next Fed chair must be data-driven, pointing to rising wages and a historically strong Black Friday. However, markets are also digesting mixed employment signals, including declines in private payrolls and a surge in layoffs reported by Challenger. Bond yields near 4. 10% have pressured some tech stocks, while others, like Meta, rose sharply on reports of spending cuts in the metaverse division, Dollar General, Self, and other sectors. Across Asia, markets show cautious optimism. Moderate gains in Hong Kong, Shanghai, Mumbai, and Sydney, while Tokyo corrects slightly but maintains the symbolic 50,000-point threshold. India's central bank cut repo rates by 25 basis points to 25%, marking the lowest level since 2022. European markets remain focused on inflation, employment moderation, and the resilience of corporate profits. 7 consecutive months of gains have revived optimism, though tensions remain high as Vladimir Putin intensifies pressure on Europe and the war in Ukraine nears its 4th year. The expectation is clear. Rate cuts are coming, likely sustaining a strong year-end market rally. Automakers, especially in Europe, surged after Donald Trump signed an executive order rolling back Biden-era environmental mandates in favor of combustion engines. But Europe's aggressive 2030 transition plan remains uncertain amid fierce competition from Chinese EV manufacturers and persistent supply chain challenges. Meta's renewed focus on artificial intelligence over the metaverse marks a strategic correction. It took time, but they now prioritize what truly advances capability and value rather than speculative future concepts. Digital assets trade flat but steady. Bitcoin near $92,136, Ethereum holding around $3,165, and mixed results among altcoins like Binance Coin, Cardano, Solana, and Ripple. In the global press, defense concerns dominate. The Financial Times highlights U.S. military leadership scrutiny and efforts to unlock frozen Russian assets.
The Wall Street Journal and New York Times report further shifts toward fossil fuels and internal Pentagon investigations involving lethal operations at sea.
The Washington Post details congressional scrutiny over a Caribbean drug boat strike and continued political battles around Texas redistricting. European coverage notes strengthened cooperation between India and Russia, energy imports, renewed defense ties, joint technology ventures, and shared objectives for peace. Putin reinforces that India is not neutral, it has a position, and that position is for peace. Modi responds with confidence that their cooperation will foster stability despite global crises. Elsewhere, a massive dust storm has struck one of Australia's largest underground gold mines in the Tanami Desert, causing serious concern about operational damage. And the night sky delivered history. The final full moon of 2025, the cold moon, a rare supermoon, brighter and larger than anything we will see again until 2042. Finally, we confront a crucial societal warning. There is an increasingly dangerous alliance between big tech and modern education. Children depend on digital tools for homework. Teachers rely on AI to prepare lessons and even correct assignments, and the system pushes engagement over learning. Psychologists are hired to keep kids glued to screens, eroding vocabulary, emotional expression, and genuine human communication. We risk raising a generation unable to describe their feelings, children who may turn to violence when words fail. This isn't just an education crisis, it's a threat to democracy itself. Democracy requires language, articulation, the ability to grasp and express reality. Losing that means losing the foundation of free society. We must protect reality, preserve our children's minds, and defend sovereignty. Because if disagreement itself becomes a crime, if the will of the people is dismissed as illegitimate, then who decides what democracy is? Where does the power really lie? If the voices of citizens are replaced by the decrees of distant bureaucrats, then why do we vote at all? The question is simple. Who rules ordinary people or an unelected elite convinced they should create a new empire where national sovereignty is obsolete? And let me be blunt. We are sliding into a world where the people who talk the loudest about democracy are the same people strangling it behind closed doors. Look at what is happening with so-called content moderation and fines against platforms like X. They don't want safety. They want obedience. They don't want truth. They want control. When a bureaucracy in Brussels or Washington can decide what you're allowed to see, what you're allowed to say, and which opinions are declared dangerous, that is not democracy. That is soft authoritarianism wrapped in the language of human rights. At the same time, a new alliance is formed between big tech and modern education. Your child goes to class, the teacher prepares lessons with AI, the homework is done with AI, the grading is done with AI, and the tech companies sit in the middle, collecting the data, shaping the attention, designing the addiction. They hire psychologists and attention engineers to keep kids hooked for as many hours as possible because every extra minute of screen time is more money, more data, more power. The result is a generation that struggles to read deeply, to focus, to build a rich vocabulary, to express emotions with precision. And when young people cannot put their feelings into words, they reach for other tools, shouting, vandalism, violence. We tell ourselves the problem is that they don't know their emotions, so we invent emotional intelligence classes. But the real crisis is deeper. They no longer know how to describe reality, how to name what is in front of them, how to argue, how to disagree without destroying. This is not a side issue. This is the foundation of self-government. Without language, there is no debate. Without debate, there is no consent. Without consent, there is no democracy. And while we are distracted talking about quarterly earnings, rate cuts, crypto prices, and the latest pivot from the metaverse to artificial intelligence, the architecture of control is being built around us. Laws against misinformation, financial pressure on dissenting platforms, secretive security partnerships, and a constant drumbeat that says national sovereignty is an obstacle, that popular will is a threat, that voters cannot be trusted with complex decisions. Now, they even tell us that if people insist on their own borders, their own laws, their own traditions, they are somehow anti-democratic. Think about the insanity of that. The very act of a nation choosing its own path is rebranded as extremism. So I ask you, if the will of the people is wrong, by definition, who is right? If the voters must be corrected, who does the correcting? Unelected commissioners, central bankers, corporate boards, tech billionaires, committees of experts who never face an election, never risk their own careers when they are wrong, yet decide everything from what you can drive to what you can heat your home with to what you are allowed to say online. This is the real battle of our time. It's not only fought on the front lines in Ukraine, Gaza, or the South China Sea. It is fought in classrooms, on timelines, in regulatory offices, and algorithmic black boxes. The question is brutally simple. Will free citizens continue to shape their nations, or will nations be reshaped over the heads of their citizens by an elite that claims to know better? I am Scott Ritter, and I am telling you, if we do not defend language, truth, and sovereignty now. We may wake up in a world where voting remains as a ritual, but the decisions have already been made long before you ever enter the booth. And let me make this unmistakably clear. We are approaching the edge of a cliff that nations rarely survive. Across Europe, across America, a quiet coup is unfolding, not with tanks or soldiers in the streets, but with signatures on regulations, with censorship hidden inside terms of service, with propaganda disguised as moral virtue. They say this is for our safety, for our stability, for the collective good, but every tyrant in history has spoken the same soothing words right before crushing the people beneath them. Look at Ukraine, a nation ripped apart because elites in Washington and Brussels believed they could reshape an entire region without consequences. They promised freedom, prosperity, NATO protection. What did Ukrainians receive? Misery. Draft notices. Empty cemeteries filling faster than factories can produce headstones. Putin warned the West. He made it absolutely clear, but arrogance deafened them. Now, the same architects of catastrophe dare to lecture the world about democracy while they silence speech, weaponize sanctions, and rewrite borders by force. And as our leaders funnel billions into endless proxy wars, they tell working families to expect less, to accept colder winters, to sacrifice for values, their values, not ours. They build a future where your car, your stove, your job, your property, even your ideas belong to them. They want a world where a small, insulated elite commands everyone else to obey, where sovereignty is a relic and patriotism a crime. But here is what terrifies them. People are waking up. Farmers are blocking capitals with their tractors. Workers are striking against directives written continents away. Voters are refusing to hand over their nations like gifts to global institutions that answer to no one. The cracks in their empire are spreading, and they know it. That's why censorship grows harsher. That's why propaganda grows louder. That's why dissenters are smeared, banned, arrested. The mask is slipping, and behind it is not freedom, not equality, not democracy, but raw power. And now, as the old order begins to panic, they tell us that our refusal to kneel makes us the enemies of peace. No, it makes us the defenders of civilization. And I will tell you this without hesitation. If we allow our words, our borders, our children, our national will to be stolen now, we will lose them forever. This is the moment. History is calling, and we must decide whether we remain spectators while our world is rewritten, or whether we stand up, speak out, and take back the destiny that belongs to the people and only the people. As we stand at the crossroads of history, there is one truth that must thunder across every capital, every institution, every secret room where power believes it can hide from the people. This world does not belong to the few. It belongs to all of us. For too long, we have been told to stay silent, to trust the experts, to obey the instructions of governments and corporations that do not know our lives and do not care about our futures. They thought fear would keep us divided, but fear has failed because what they never understood is that ordinary people, when pushed far enough, become unstoppable. Across continents, a new awakening has begun. Workers who once whispered now shout. Citizens who once complied now question everything. Parents who once surrendered their children to screens and systems now stand like lions to defend them. This is not chaos, this is rebirth. The failing empire of technocrats, censors, and unaccountable elites is collapsing under the weight of its own arrogance. Look at how fast their narratives crumble the moment we refuse to repeat them. Look at how desperate they become when we demand evidence instead of slogans, when we demand debate instead of decrees, when we demand sovereignty instead of subservience. They claim we are dangerous simply because we refuse to kneel. They call us extremists simply because we insist on thinking for ourselves. They label us enemies simply because we remember that freedom is our inheritance, not their permission. But let them shout. Let them smear. Let them deploy every weapon of intimidation they have. because we are done apologizing for wanting our nations back. We are done pretending that censorship is compassion. We are done letting unelected committees design the limits of human possibility. And here is what they fear most. We are no longer playing defense. We are marching forward, and the world is marching with us. From the farmers in Europe blocking the roads of those who forgot who feeds them, to the workers in America who refuse to be replaced by code, robots, and global outsourcing schemes, to the families in every nation who say our children are not your experiment. The line has been drawn, and behind that line stands something they cannot defeat: the will of the people. When citizens reclaim their voice, the powerful tremble. When citizens reclaim their identity, the propaganda shrivels. When citizens reclaim their country, the false gods of globalization fall like statues of rusted iron. So hear me clearly. This is the moment we rise, not with hate, but with certainty, not with rage, but with resolve, not to dominate, but to free what has been chained. The elites wanted a world without borders, without culture, without history, without accountability, and without us. Instead, they have unleashed a global movement that will restore all of it. And when future generations look back on these years, they will not remember the politicians, the bankers, the censors, or the bureaucrats. They will remember the citizens who refused to surrender. They will remember the moment ordinary people became giants. They will remember that freedom did not fade quietly into the night. It roared back like a storm that no one could contain. I am Scott Ritter, and I am telling you with absolute conviction, we will win this century, not by permission, but by courage. The time of the silent majority pretending to be powerless is over. The world is changing, not in their image, but in ours. The future belongs to those who rise, and we are rising now. And as we look ahead, we must understand that history doesn't wait for those who stand on the sidelines. It rewards those who step forward when everything is at stake. Today, the world is changing, not by the command of elites, but by the awakening of millions who refuse to be ruled by fear, lies, and manufactured illusions. Those who believe they could manipulate humanity like numbers on a screen are slowly realizing they miscalculated the human spirit. They thought convenience would sedate us. They thought censorship would silence us. They thought division would break us. They were wrong. Because the moment people recognize the cage, the instinct for freedom becomes unstoppable. And make no mistake, the cage has been exposed. The propaganda that once controlled nations now collapses in real time. The narratives that once dictated obedience now dissolve the moment they are questioned. Their control was an illusion, and illusions die when confronted with truth spoken out loud. Around the world, the powerful tremble because they see something rising that cannot be suppressed. Conviction. The conviction of farmers who stand firm against dictates written by strangers across the ocean who never worked a single day in the fields. The conviction of citizens who refuse to let unelected officials decide what they can say, buy, drive, build, or believe. The conviction of parents who know that their children are not test subjects in a grand social experiment. These people, ordinary, humble, hardworking, are the axis upon which the future now turns. Their determination marks the beginning of a revolution more profound than any political party, any institution, any treaty could ever imagine. And here is the truth the elites fear most. The world is remembering the ancient law of liberty, that power flows upward only when free people allow it. They no longer allow it. Power is being reclaimed. Sovereignty is being restored. Identity is being reborn. And with each citizen who stands up, with each voice that breaks through censorship, with each act of courage in the face of intimidation, the old architecture of control crumbles further. The opposition will not step aside politely. They will smear us as dangerous. They will target our leaders. They will weaponize fear to push us back into silence. But fear has lost its power. Not because the danger has disappeared, but because we finally understand what happens if we do nothing. Silence is no longer safety. Silence is surrender. And we are done surrendering. So let this be a message to every citizen who feels alone in their convictions. You are not alone. You are part of the greatest awakening of our century. Let this be a message to every institution that imagines it can override the will of the people. Your authority ends where our freedom begins. And let this be a message to the future. When democracy faltered, when sovereignty was threatened, when truth was being suffocated, ordinary people stood up and refused to let civilization fall. I am Scott Ritter, and I stand with everyone who dares to believe that a nation should be governed only by the consent of its people. Remember this: they had their chance to shape the world without us, and they broke it. Now we will build a world that includes everyone, and we will build it stronger than ever before. The age of fear is ending. The age of the people is beginning. And to those who still cling to illegitimate power, those who think the world belongs to them alone, hear these words clearly. You will not define the future. We will. The next chapter of humanity has already started, and its authors are rising. We are rising, and we will not stop